Well, we're streaming, so we can wait for Tom and just, or we can move on.
Either way, should I send him a text or you want to?
Sure, if you've got his phone.
I do.
Maybe I'll just say for everyone out there that may be watching, this is the CEDAC meeting of December 7th. And we are streamed on YouTube. CEDAC is meeting on Zoom. We are not taking public comment, but this is a review of the tannery proposals. CEDAC their work, and then they're going to send that off to the select board, and the select board will then take it and likely have workshops on with each of the entities that submitted a proposal. As always, people can submit comments on the select board or myself or the town manager at any time. That's just for everyone out there that may be listening. But we are letting this process just play out without public comment.
Okay, Tom will be joining us in a minute. I forwarded him the link. He had misplaced the meeting link, so.
It happens to me too. I don't know where.
Yeah, I know. Especially, I think I got 3 links at some point between the change of times and dates.
Yeah.
Okay, I think he's here. Hello, Tom, you're muted.
Oh, hey, how are you?
How are you?
Good.
All right, full house. Thanks for each of you for joining us. You should have our agenda. Let's go ahead and call it to order. Should have the agenda for the day. As you recall, last Monday, we identified 2 areas we were going to review: compliance with the RFP submittal requirements, and then a review and evaluation of the criteria contained within the RFP. And so that's kind of what we want to accomplish today. Jeremy, you got any opening thoughts?
No, other than, you know, I looked at this a little bit more in the 9 items plus the comp plan and select board's goals and priorities. A number of these, like you just looked at this week, the RFP talked about consistency with the tannery work group recommendations, etc. Also talked about the guiding principles, and some of these other items are very, very brief answers, and I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on some of these. And I think what you may want to do more, Lehman, is maybe not next week meeting. You can figure it out, but have a meeting probably devoted to comp plan and select board goal and priority questions or issues, because I think that might really help rather than you guys trying to formulate it on your own. I think maybe having a kind of review of all that stuff might be helpful.
So you're thinking a future meeting to go to, I guess, what, have you give us some background on comp plan and select board?
Well, maybe it's not the meeting for me to give the whole thing, but I'm thinking if we were talking about 3 more weeks after this, and I'm just looking at this, if we're talking about the submittal requirements and the evaluation criteria today, and then we have the guiding principles, and then we have the work group recommendations.
Yep.
And then some of the other ones are very simple, you know, like experience, who ends up getting the environmental responsibility. Those are very easy.
They are.
Incentives required. You know, those are no brainers. I mean, I think we all know the answers to those pretty much now, or we get there pretty easily. But the thing that's out there that we don't really know or have a handle on is what are, you know, what are some, how do we relate the select board goals and priorities and the comp plan goals and recommendations with these projects? And we may want to spend, or at least have on one of these days, discuss that issue, because again, I think we could probably shoot for that on the 21st and have this other stuff nailed out on the 14th. That's just me. I think maybe we should see how this rolls for you guys, and then we can talk about process moving forward. But I think it's
Okay.
Does that make sense? Everyone?
Yeah, I mean, I worked on the comprehensive plan and kind of helped write it, but I didn't really write it because it was really a cut and paste. And then we modified it, and it's almost up for a new one.
Right.
So, and there's really finite sections. So maybe Jeremy, you and I could just cut out the sections of the comp plan that applies to the that applies to this, provide it to CEDAC, and then maybe we could move forward from there.
All right.
Hey, can I interrupt a second, Jeremy?
Sure.
Okay, I've got a call from Tom Resnick, but he thinks he's all set. He couldn't find it on Facebook, but we are transmitting, right?
We're on YouTube.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. Bye. Sorry for the interruption.
Jeff, that makes sense.
Right?
You and I can do something like that pretty quickly.
Yeah, because it's a big document. There's no
Yeah.
sense in everybody trying to get through that.
Yeah, it is a big document.
No way.
And,
way.
and, yeah, and some of it may not be relevant to what we're looking at too. So,
Oh yeah, no, it's a big fluff
Yeah.
piece. I'll admit that.
okay.
All right. That sounds good.
Okay, so with that in mind, and we'll revisit that at the end of this meeting today, if that's okay. What we want to do is go through those first review criteria, compliance with the RFP submittal requirements, and then the criteria. And what I thought we'd do is just go down. We got 4 proposals. Let's go through each one of them. Jeremy has sent us a 4-page document that will kind of track the questions we need to ask on that. And let's look at a proposal, go through those questions, and then move on to the next one. And I would again propose we just, I'm looking at the town's website. All 4 of them are listed, and that's unless you got a suggestion, we'll just go down the list. Does that work for everybody?
Yes, that's fine.
Anybody got any comments? Okay.
Lehman, is somebody going to take notes or translate our discussion, somehow capture it?
That's Jeremy and I. That's a question, Jeremy. What's your thought on that? We did have a brief conversation about that, but I'm not sure.
We did. We should have that done. Yes, for sure. The YouTube, I will say in craft minutes, the YouTube video is always there. And so anyone can see what's been discussed. Minutes are generally supposed to be summary of discussions and summary of action that's taken. Minutes are not intended to be verbatim of what's discussed. So what I don't want to have to do is actually do verbatim notes of what has happened. But we do need to have minutes taken. The board has always had a secretary of sorts to do those things. I have drafted very basic minutes over the course of since I've been here. I can continue to do that. I'd prefer if a CEDAC member did it. That's how other committees operate. But I get it if someone doesn't want to do it. It can be cumbersome.
I will say that having taken many minutes at many meetings, it's very difficult to be a participant and a minute taker. And I think this discussion is too important and needs to have everybody participating.
Perfect,
Yeah.
Robin. Why don't I then, thank you for that. Why don't I then try to just do some very basic minutes of discussion items, itemized for minutes, and I'll refer people to the YouTube video that is always there, because again, I need to try to participate in it as well. And, we're going to do a verbatim minutes. But but I appreciate what you're saying, Roger. If that's what you'd like me to do, kind of more of a summary of minutes, if you will, because I've seen minutes go one way, and then at times other entities want minutes, more involved and more detailed. And, the minute taker sometimes gets lost in what they need to do because it's the reality. I mean, I'm just being honest.
Right.
It's very different than a ZBA meeting or a planning board meeting.
Well, I think my interest is, I think on behalf of the rest of you too, is that whatever we say we need to, and will eventually be conveyed to the select board, we need to be sure that those items are captured and that we don't have to go back and kind of revisit what we said more than once so that we can keep moving with our process.
Fair. From a practical purpose, that's why I think I sent out what I did, was because I think if everyone could jot their notes down or their thoughts on each one of these items, those will be kind of part of the record, and base your final not recommendation, but your final information that you present to the select board would come from the collective group's information. And I don't think we ought to try to remember it all from what we're saying here today, but we're actually using some of, the information that you have and you write down. Does that make sense? I mean, that was my hope.
Yeah, I took notes on all of these four proposals, and what I'd like to do today is hear what other people have to say too, and I will add some of the notes that seem relevant to me. So that would be my record of being able to follow, and maybe if everybody did that and we then pass these in or whatever we do with them at the end, somebody can make some sense out of them.
Well,
Yeah.
that was my hope, was that I'd take that information and summarize it into a document for the select board, present it to you guys then, and then you'd give it to the select board.
Right.
I think that's the idea, is that we are, the bottom line of this is we're supposed to hand the select board recommendations and observations and questions they may want to ask and that sort of thing in a summary form. It's backed up by YouTube videos and all our notes and stuff like that. But what they want to see is a concise set of information. And as long as we can pull that together at the end, Jeremy, at least that's my opinion on it.
It seems like we also need to come to a consensus about what the answers to these questions are. Because
Yeah.
I don't know if it would be helpful if, for instance, if some people say, yes, this was included, and other people say, no, this wasn't included. And all we do is hand in those notes and they're all contradictory. That won't be helpful. So I do think it's important as we go through today to come to a consensus as a group on what the answers to these questions are.
Yep.
Yes.
So to help answer that question, I came up with a rating system. Since we had 4 applicants, I rated each one 1 to 4, and 4 being the worst, 1 being the best. And if we weight the groups, whatever the question is that we feel the most weight to it, we could consensus on how to weight each question. And at the end, you would have a score, but we would also have all of our consensus opinion for each item as well. And I think with a weighted score that provided like our individual analysis for each item would help as well, with a number that says, this one scored, in GolfWise, the lowest score, and therefore is what we recommend. And we have all these comments, or maybe our comments supersede that score, and we come up with that as the answer. But yeah, definitely consensus on what we are going to advise a select board to, move forward with.
Yeah, Jeff, it seems to me that for today, most of our questions really aren't evaluative. They're either, was this thing present in the proposal or was it not? And I don't know how you maybe rated each of those questions, but I think it would be hard. I didn't try to judge anything today. I just tried to answer whether something was included or whether it was not included. And if a question was about, does it add to job creation? And, longer term, and if it didn't, the answer was just no. But I wasn't trying to evaluate the proposal because it did or didn't involve job creation. I was just trying to answer the question that was outlined in what Jeremy gave us. And, you know, I think it seems to me it might be early to be doing a point system if in fact what we're doing today is just doing a part of the overall evaluation or recommendation that we're going to give, because we're just doing these, how well it met certain criteria. And then the next meeting, we might be doing another aspect of it. I don't know if at the end, if we all came to a consensus, for instance, on today's thing for all 4 of these, and then at the next meeting, we do some other kind of evaluative piece. And at the end, we look at each proposal and, you know, let's just say it's Friends of the Tannery Park. And we go through whether or not it met the criteria. Maybe we give 1 point for each of the criteria that were met, that were supposed to be met, or whatever it is. And then there are other aspects, and we could potentially give a recommendation based on how well it met all of these various criteria. But it seems to me today we're just taking a piece of ultimately what we're going to be looking at and not the whole yet. Is that right?
Let me just, can I just comment real quick? You're absolutely right in that, I'm sorry, that I kind of have the background on that master plan in our comprehensive plan. And while I say it's a fluff piece, it really is a guiding document on our land use. And we use it in planning board all the time. And since I just feel like I might have a little extra background that I can just quickly do this, but I think you're absolutely right. And that from maybe your point of view, I did the same thing. I just said, yeah, it qualifies, it checks the box. But then I used that master plan, my background in the planning board for the last, you know, over half a decade, 6 years, and basically like evaluated each one and how it works with our guiding principles and master plan. So I think that's where I think Jeremy and I should get you those sections so that we can effectively move forward in this. Because you're absolutely right, Maria. I mean,
Well, Jeremy, I've got a question for you. Are we being asked by the select board to make recommendations or rank these?
No, you weren't. That was not the task that they had you. They did not want you to rank them. They wanted really, I mean, in essence, you could rank them by what you say about it, right? But they did not a formal recommendation. They didn't really want a scaled ranked review, but they definitely want to know, you know, if someone submitted something and did not submit anything that was required.
They want to know that.
They want to know that. I mean, that's a glaring thing. And
if somebody submitted something that raises a question in our minds, we want to pass that along. It's something they should give some thought to. Okay.
Correct.
Meg, you look like you have to say something.
No,
And then I have something to say.
I was thinking that if we start on this like now, that it might become quite clear that we can go through it fairly easily. And if there are questions, they'll come up at that time. But we're going through all the process problem. And I think maybe it might work out better if we just start it.
Let's start and we'll work on the process as we go or at the end. Okay. Anybody else before we move forward?
Robin, did you want to say something?
No, I'll just wait till we get there.
Thanks.
Okay. All right. Okay. So let's start. We're going to, as I said, we're going to go down the list by proposal as it appears on the town's website. And the first one being Northland and Dovetail Consulting. And I guess, you know, we just go through these from the standpoint of the 4-pager that Jeremy sent us of what's, you know, asking each of these, are these included or not? And, you know, any kind of details you want to add to that is what I had in mind. So with that in mind, the first part is through this is the compliance with RFP submittal requirements, purchase price or lease price for the developer's acquisition. Anybody, I mean, give me your thoughts on that.
Say yes.
I mean, yes, they gave a price.
That's where my rating system came in, was because question 2 is, yeah, they checked the box, but question was it's a rating system. I mean, once you get into, are they going to give the town money? How much tax revenue is going to come in?
Right.
What's the land use going to be? You kind of have to rate it.
Yeah, I think some of them answered the question better than others, so it's not a
Yes.
black and white. I mean, this one was $85,000 purchase price and lease the area for the farmer's market back for $1, leasing it back to the town. They have timelines in there. They have amounts in there. They're very specific in answering that question.
Yeah, that was my sense too.
I hear what Jeff's saying, but I do think it would be helpful for us today if we just answer the questions, because it's even hard to rate based on what is even, what being in the world of education. I have no idea what would constitute a 1, a 2, a 3, or a 4 on a rating scale. And until we all had the same idea of what a rating means, it would be really difficult for us to rate anything unless we're using the same kind of rating scale. So I would, suggest that we just literally go down and answer the questions and agree whether it's yes or no. And, any details, I do think it's an important detail what the purchase price is. And I think it's worth noting. And there are other things that I think are going to be like that might be worth noting. The cost of the project probably is an important thing, or how many jobs or how many housing units. But I think we should just try to stick to the facts in this analysis. And I think eventually we'll be able to pull together. I mean, I know it would be helpful if I had all the questions on the left and each of the projects across the top. And then I could eventually look down. How many criteria did this one meet? How many criteria and the other things we're looking at? And we could look at it as a whole picture and be able to maybe give some feedback overall. But I do think if we ever went to a rating system, we would all need to understand what that rubric meant. Like,
Absolutely. Absolutely. The problem, that's exactly why I'm bringing it up now in the first meeting, is that if we came up with that now, we wouldn't stumble on it later, because everyone's going to check these boxes. I mean, they've all fulfilled the requirements of the application.
Actually, I had a lot of no's. Yeah, I didn't think so either.
Yeah, I did too on some of it.
Okay, we get a couple out quick then, right?
Roger. Roger, you're muted.
You're on mute, Roger.
I'm still wondering how this can be most helpful to the select board. And if we just say yes or no primarily, they're still going to have to plow through all of these, and I'm not sure we're saving them any time or really providing much information unless it's backed up by some level of factual information that we have at our fingertips. Or, I mean, does the $85,000 for the land mean anything here? Well, you have to look at the scale of all of that, but that's an easy thing to put in, and it saves the select board looking back through, or maybe you go with Maria's idea, a matrix of something that just kind of highlighted what's important, what can be summarized in a very brief fashion, and it makes it more valuable in terms of understanding and interpretation. I suppose not only to the board, but to the public who may have to take a look at it.
I think we can do that on some, on these, again, like the first one, yes, they answered that question. It's going to be a purchase price of $85,000 and $1 a year lease. That's it, period. Move on to the next one. And we could put those probably, Jeremy, in the notes. And at some point, when we pull all this together, then those facts that are in each of these are in front of the select board for them to know. Hopefully they will have read the proposals as well, but that will remind them and maybe help them do a comparison of, just the cash flow into the project. How does all this stack up compared to what's going to be invested by the town back into the property? So if if that works, let's at least have those for now in a summary or in the notes and minutes of the meeting, and we can pull it together later. Does that work? Anybody got any comments on that? Okay.
Okay.
All right. Next one, description of the proposed uses. Obviously, this one is residential. 30 to 50 apartments, no retail. I've listened. Anybody got any notes on it? Target. These are my notes. Targeting working families, stormwater management, possibly a playground.
Yes,
To
but
fit
they
in
did-
with
I'm
it.
sorry, they did say public playground. They didn't say
Yes,
only for residents. They said public.
Right.
So,
Obviously, they address the issue or the need for the farmers market to have space. The character or the look of the structure is going to fit into the neighborhood. Those are things I picked out. They seem to address that part well.
yeah.
They had the fact that they had a mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom apartments, and the households were limited to 60% of the or less of the area median income, which is in the range of $24,000 to $41,000 annually. I mean, if we're talking workforce housing here, which I think is an element that figures into the conceptual framework of what may be done. This is a project that achieves some affordable housing goals.
I think some of those things come in later too. To me, this was just, is there a site plan and a description of the project? This was one that I gave it a yes. I didn't write a whole lot down on it.
Yeah.
If there's and this may be way down the road, if there's a question in my mind, and folks like Jeff and Jeremy can answer it, is if they address parking adequately for tenants versus farmers market, customers versus other things that are going on. And I don't know, but that's just something that somebody needs to look at, if they address parking issues.
Jeremy, you want me to quickly jump on that one? I mean, it's a lot of trips when you get 35 to 50 units.
Yeah.
That's a lot of traffic.
Well,
it's a lot of traffic. I mean, certainly our parking ordinance, and I think they spoke to it, parking will need to be amended in some way.
Yeah.
Which is often the case for workforce housing projects. I mean, like Roger said, we got 1 bedroom apartments, may be for 1 person. So certainly that would be something that they would need down the road. Farmers market, just so you know, the farmers market has a lease on a portion of the property. They don't lease the entire farmers market. They have a lease on a portion of the property.
Correct. Yep. But that's just one of the things where I think we need to address as part of our assignment is any questions that come up. In my mind, that's a question, parking, not something we need to solve today, but just be aware that's a question. Anybody else got anything on that one?
Nope, that one was just a check mark.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Description of developers, corporation, and all that. Again, yes.
Oh, and
Very
want a TIF?
I'm sorry.
They want to put a TIF in for 30 years, tax incremental finance on 70%, 75% of the asset. I think for 30 years, 75% of the property tax value taken from the town is a significant.
That's a lot of money.
That's a condition of this proposal.
Yes.
Yeah, keep in mind that the TIF and the other question that, zoning amendments, that's one of the other things that we're going to hit on all of them. That's why I was trying to keep these going, and we'll just talk about all that stuff as we get to that item.
Right.
Okay. So the description of their entity, I think, was, as you said, a yes. Development cost, that was pretty well spelled out. Robin, what'd you say?
I said that was another yes. It was a check.
Yeah. Okay.
They were very good. I think in the way they presented it, I could follow it so easily because of Jeremy's notes here.
Yeah.
And they did exactly what they were asked to do as far as answering. Right. I'm not saying that we know all the answers. I'm just saying they answered the question that was asked of them. And I found that easy to follow.
I had a question about this one. They did clearly say what the development cost would be. I didn't really know the implications of how they spelled out how they were going to pay for it, which seemed like it was all from tax credits, subsidies, grants, TIF, and other things. And I didn't know the implications of that the plan, here's the cost, and the plan to pay that cost is all of these other things. And I just don't know how feasible that is. But I don't know if that's going to come up later as well, Jeremy.
Yeah, that should be, I think, one of your items that is a question mark that they're going to have to spell out to the town when they do their presentation. And I don't think we should dive deep into that stuff because you're absolutely right. I mean, there are entities like Northland doing these types of projects across the state, and there's tax credits involved. You know, there's a whole TIFs involved, and those are needed. There's no question from a development perspective to get workforce housing anywhere in the state of Maine. Every entity has to take advantage of those programs. It's the only way to do those projects in Maine because of the cost of doing construction. I mean, it's just through the roof.
I will say too, they have a lot of experience in doing that and putting those packages together. And they also incorporate that into their timeline. There's very specific timelines in this whole thing, which says if we don't have this by then, it's like an out. It's like that's the end of the deal. It's not they buy the property and then try and put all their packages together. It was very well ordered, I thought, the way they did that.
My sense is they've had experience at this in other communities.
No.
Yeah, they have.
Okay. Development costs we've covered. Redevelopment experience in other communities, I think, again, well documented on what they've done elsewhere.
Well, I think there was more experience, redevelopment experience on environmental projects, environmental cleanups, I think was the question, Lehman.
I'm sorry.
And they did have that.
Yes,
Yeah, the answer was still yes. Yep.
Yes, you're right. But again, they've done that in other communities is what I gather.
Yeah.
Current or similar projects. Another yes.
Yes.
Where are you? Oh, yeah. Okay. Yes.
Okay. They seem to also, just an observation, they identified all the players except a contractor, real estate development architect, landscape architect, project manager. So they have identified who the players are, except for who would be the contractor, general contractor. Project schedule. You know, they assume a contract with fall of 20, which obviously isn't going to happen. So I think, that would be another. That would be a conversation of, okay, because this has many steps to go through before a contract. But at least they spelled some timelines out, but it was based on fall of 20. Any thoughts on that?
I think just for a point of reference, I think it's a very important question, obviously it was needed so that we could understand how we needed to move forward on our cleanup. Just keeping that in mind. We really need to know because, again, if we can't get to voters until June with this, the reality is the cleanups as part of this type of project is not going to happen simultaneously. There's going to be some overlap here, and we'll likely have to move forward on the cleanup, and then the developer will come in behind it. Rather than doing it all kind of at the same time, but it can work fine. That was the really crux of that question.
Yeah, I think so. And they had to start somewhere, and they started fall of 20 and showed us a schedule. So that works. Okay, number of housing units and prices. bedrooms, rental rates, all they included. There's some income restrictions. They also mentioned possibly some for sale condos.
When we get to that, I did have some questions on that. There, as far as their affordability, is this one where we're asking, to remain affordable? There was a 45-year term on that for affordable housing based on all their financing and everything. And I think the question would be, what happens after that 45 years? Is that renewable? Is it something that can extend? Do they all become, I know I worked with affordable housing years ago, and there were people putting in affordable housing in harbors because they knew that it was a 25-year, 30-year project, and at the end of that, they were going to become condos, and that's where they were going to make their money.
Yep.
So the question to me here is this affordable in perpetuity? A deeded single-family home would be theoretically affordable in perpetuity. So I had a question around that piece and what they would do on that longer term.
That's a great question to ask them when they come to us, for sure.
Brownfield cleanup, again, seemed experienced in that. Okay, then on to the evaluation criteria, and that the first one, some of the things they're going to be asking for, or some of the things we're looking at, and Jeff, you mentioned earlier the 75% tax break for 30 years, which is I guess that's assuming that's about when they will they'll pay off their debt on this, or be through with their costs. But that's the question: is a town ready for something like that?
It really becomes the town being a partner in the project.
It does.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Okay. Can I just ask though, Jeff, maybe you can help me understand this too, though. 25% of a project that size is going to be significantly more than something else. Right?
Well, we could estimate that real quick. I mean, the value would be what, say $150 a square foot, and that's it's not that big of a deal to calculate that estimate, but 75% of your property taxes for 30 years that's a lot of money. I mean, wouldn't we all like that?
Yeah,
I
would.
It is, but I think Steve makes a good point. 25% of 2 million is a lot more than 100% of some small, a couple of single family houses. So I think it is a good thing to take into consideration.
And
yeah, absolutely. Because at the end we get the 100%. So
right.
I think
we
also
definitely need to consider that.
Take into account at some point that one of the top goals, it seems to me, of the select board and the comprehensive plan is affordable housing. And so I think that is something you have to weigh against the 70% tax.
And that can I just speak? That's been my paradox the whole time, is that we're trying for affordable housing and we're trying for jobs. And how do you need them both? And we have one proposal that's proposing jobs and one proposal that's proposing housing. And that spot is perfect for housing because you can walk to the schools and everything.
The other thing, and this probably isn't the place for it, but when Martin Cates used to be on this committee years ago as a select person, and he was very interested in affordable housing, one of Camden's really big challenges, we don't have multifamily housing, and that's where you get truly affordable housing for obviously, 50 potential units here. That's pretty significant to be able to do that.
Yeah.
True. Okay, on to the next one. I guess this has to do with residential preference be given to proposals that provide permanent or deed restricted affordability. Did I miss that? Is it in there?
I didn't see it either.
I didn't.
I
That's
think
the
Anybody-
this
four-
gets to Robin's question.
Yeah.
That's the 45 years. It's
But
a-
you saw something there?
Yeah, it's for 45 years.
Okay.
So my question was, where does it go beyond that? I mean, I think their density issue is, they definitely check off density, which I think is, in my opinion, is really good.
Yes.
It is not permanent. One of the things, I don't know, the thing that I missed in this was, did they really address green construction of some sort?
I didn't see that either.
I didn't see that in here. That was one thing I did not see.
Okay.
Um,
I missed the 45 years, but I did pick up that there was no green practice in here. Okay. Anybody else?
Well, this is where they talk about income eligibility to be a.
Right.
Okay. Preference for proposals that are consistent with the Tannery Work Group and AST RWG.
I thought they hit 6 out of 11 of those guiding principles.
Okay, me too. Which one for you?
Yeah, they hit a lot of them.
First
Although they're-
3,
Yeah,
and then 3 out of the last 4.
I had 1, 2, 3, 6, 9, and 11.
Okay. And we can, yeah, okay. And we'll get back into that in some later conversations with other meetings. Skills and experience of the redevelopers and the personnel team, financial capacity. They did address that.
All right, before you go there, Lehman, just
Yes.
back to the last one.
Right.
Was the Tannery Work Group's recommendations going to touch on theirs? You touched on
Right.
We
how they
touched
met
on
the
both.
Apollo Tannery site
Yeah.
development guiding principles, which are different than the work group recommendations. So just wanted to
Yeah.
touch on
I-
that.
I think they addressed both of them. And I mean, I just compared, at least me, did they address these, and they addressed certain ones of them. And I think that's what we're saying is on both of those documents, they checked a lot of boxes. Not all of them, but
Okay.
do you want a list of those from?
Well, this is where it may be helpful
Okay.
at some point have at least to have written notes, because then because those notes formulated what you thought about and what you
So
talked.
if we look at the guiding principles, why don't we just go down them? It's fairly quick. They sell the site as a single parcel. That's a yes. Preference given to qualified buyers who will allow some form of public access to the riverwalk path area at a minimum and public right-of-way easement. They're doing that. Trees that line the street on the site should remain. They're doing that. The site should be marketed to new owners who can create jobs. That really doesn't apply because they're not doing economic development, but it would be certainly marketing to new people coming to the community, I think, is the other side of that. Targeting selected new owner, the town should consider economic multiplier effect. Again, that was looking at an economic driver for the community, but I think as one of the other proposals noted, that affordable housing is in itself an economic driver. The town would target a new employer owner. Doesn't really fit. Town should attempt to create a demand for the site to make it unique. That's on us, not them. Encourage new owners to build flexible structures. This is not particularly a flexible structure, but I don't think that's an appropriate for this type of use. Redevelopment of the site should be attractive and aesthetically compatible with the neighborhood. They address that. I'm sure everybody will
Yep.
have different opinions on that.
On what's attractive. Yes.
Yeah, it actually kind of gives a nod to the building that used to be there, which I thought was interesting. Encourage new owners and businesses of the creative economy. I think it probably does that just in who it's addressing for housing. New owners, developers would be encouraged to make positive use of the river, hydro energy, orientation of the buildings. I don't know that what anybody feels with that. It doesn't particularly do that, but education. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I mean, I don't, you're interpreting these far more broadly than I did. Like in the list that Jeremy gave us, the last one that you had said that it creates jobs in the creative economy sector. I mean, I don't think we can say that a housing project to build apartment buildings creates jobs in the creative economy sector.
Okay.
I mean, I just, I think,
Well, it depends how you look at housing, but that's fine. I don't
know if we're like sort of thinking about it as indirect impacts, which, are projected. I don't know, because if we do it like that, then in the Mullins proposal, because so many more people will be working there, do we then say it will create a larger tax base because more people will move here because of all those jobs? I think it's dangerous for us to be thinking about our assumed indirect impacts. And it might be cleaner to really address the impact that the direct project is. The project one that is creating permanent jobs, or this one seems to clearly be an affordable housing project as opposed to a project that's trying to create jobs in the local economy.
Yep.
Lehman, I think we need to be careful too, because the list that we're going through now is actually the one that was developed and we know as guiding principles back in 2008. The Tannery Work Group is the one in the list that precedes that. And I have in my notes, of course, their proposal had 4 phases. Phase 1 was farmers market, recreational things. Phase 2, a play area. Phase 3, adventure playground. Phase 4 was perhaps a building. And so that was a more recent recommendation.
But we're being asked to look at both of
2008.
them.
Yeah, and some of them are not the same. It's not, I mean, one says lease, the other one says sell. So
Yes.
even that, there's some differences in what those two groups proposed.
I just want to agree with Maria that, I think we need to focus on direct impacts.
Okay.
And stay within the confines of what we're supposed to assess.
Right. I think some of these are not applicable because they're housing.
Yeah, I mean, that's just what it is, cut and dry.
Yep.
Okay. All right, does that give you, Jeremy, does that give you what you need?
But that's just the one. So
That's right. The Tannery Work Group is the other one. Okay.
Right.
So we need
then
to,
you go through the Tannery Work Group.
Yep.
One is their objectives. Phases. The recommendations are that the select board support the development of the farmers market.
Yep.
This does that.
It does that.
The town secure brownfield grants for future site remediation. That's happening.
Yep.
The community fundraising be encouraged for site reuse projects.
Not necessary.
That's not.
The property be leased and not sold to users.
Yeah, that's not.
And the town seek proposals for developing the building space at a future date. That's basically this phase. So I think we need to go through those like we're going through that 4-page document. That's what we're being tasked with tonight, correct, Jeremy? Okay.
Mhm.
Then there were 2 more questions on the 4-page thing.
Yep. Okay. Yes, skills, the redevelopers and the personnel and the contractors and experience with US EPA brownfield. And I guess both of those are yes.
Yep.
They address those adequately.
I agree.
All right. We okay with that one? Anybody got anything else to add?
Is that what you anticipated, Jeremy?
Yeah, that's helpful.
Is there
I mean, that's
something else?
helpful. I mean, I think what's most helpful, honestly, is some of the the discussion that's happening, because I think that's really what, these are the questions that are going to be needed to ask of the developers. And
Correct.
the select board didn't want to, in the course of their meetings, right, kind of dive into all these like you guys are looking at it, to ask those questions. I mean, but I think once everyone starts reading this stuff, it all kind of makes sense, and it all start to, I think it all just play out. I do. So.
Yeah, I think if we, go ahead, Rob.
I was just going to say, do you anticipate a time, maybe one of our last meetings, where there is a time when we really think about the questions we would have? Because that's not what I thought about for today, is what questions that I might ask. And
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. But some of the ones, Jeff's points about, the TIF for
Yep.
a number of years, Robin's question about
Yep.
housing for 45 years, what happens? I think, but reading these and kind of going through this starts making all those questions like come to mind. And then whether we discuss them now or hold on to them and create more, the better.
either way works, is
Yep.
what you're saying.
Yeah, and then we present those to the select board, and they've got a
Correct.
chance to at least be prepared when this they do these interviews to address these things. Okay, next one is the one from Tannery Park with Mullins.
Oh, Cranesport.
Cranesport. I'm sorry, I'm looking for the name. This just says, Cranesport. It's on your 4-pager. All I saw was Mike Mullins. So that's the next one that we'll talk about. And again, a lot of this is, questions answered. The first being the lease or purchase, and this will be another purchase, but this had a caveat for what the town did with the money. Am I reading that right? They would use that for match for an EPA grant.
It was on page 18. I didn't understand if that 250 was a purchase price to the town or not.
Well, it sounded like they were going to pay the town $250,000, but then that money would go as match toward a grant that would do some river
That's
restoration.
That's what I thought too, Lehman.
Okay.
So at that point, the town would have to use that money in the same river restoration. That'd be likely a condition of that grant.
That's what it sounded like to me.
We might already be up for a similar condition because of the grants proposed. So there's a lot of interconnectedness of the entire river restoration to that part of the proposal. I don't know how in the weeds we want to get with that, but I think the town putting up that much money for the grant might already be in the future.
Okay. That is when, are they talking about the portion of the river adjacent to the site, or are they talking about the whole watershed of that river? Or, I mean, what's in the proposal you're talking about, Jeff?
Well, so we're looking at the entire river to restore, and we're getting grants to do it, and the town has to match grants to do it. And so this is a weird, intricately connected thing that is being proposed. So we would have to get in the weeds a bit to figure out what that 250 means to the town.
Yeah, and that's, kind of beyond our scope, but something that obviously needs to be addressed at some level.
Yes. Yes.
I would say, however, this is the only proposal that really actually addressed the river itself, which I thought was interesting. They were, he went specifically into making sure, he's looking at improvements for that river walk and for the river itself right there. So I have to say the finance piece, I didn't get that into the weeds on, but
the purchase price is $0, correct?
I get the sense that it's $250,000, but he's earmarking what the town can use it for. I mean, you can't use that just in your general fund.
I missed that.
I did too. And
I wrote down that he was purchasing it.
one of our questions that, or
Yeah.
one of the select board's questions that they would certainly address.
Yes, that's the question, is clarify that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
That's a good way to leave it.
okay.
Okay. All right. Okay. Description of proposed uses. Again, very clear and on a combination of public space, farmers market, public use space, workshops for retails and entrepreneur. And again, I raised the question of parking for something like that. I'm not for us, but just, you know, where do all those cars go? Okay, anybody got any comments on that?
No, except they have a lot of plans and they had a lot of very good photos and
Yeah, it was.
it took a while to go through them all.
Also, well, yeah, okay. Description of the developer's entity and corporation, again, well defined.
Yeah.
He's the environmental issues with this one, with a lot, I mean, and with all of them, I guess. The things that these folks are proposing are doable on that site from a standpoint of EPA and contamination and all that sort of stuff. Jeremy, is that right? I mean, does anybody propose something that looks like a red flag of, oh, you can't do that on this site?
Not necessarily. I mean, so whatever happens here, we're going to be able to cap, and we're going to be able to cap the site, and there may be environmental covenants and deed restrictions in certain areas due to certain issues. But our consultant is confident that they can do a cleanup plan that will facilitate all of the uses that we have here.
Okay. In fact, what made me think of this is he looks like he's building up. He's not doing so much disturbance as he's raising the site. Is that on some of this stuff?
In mind, just so, I mean, so how these caps work is this is about contact with soil, human contact with soil. So the only time there is contact generally is when they're doing commercial workers are doing foundations, and commercial working are doing putting in water lines and etc. on a development project. There is a standard for park users that we have to manage. But so that's all something that we're definitely going to get into the weeds in as we go. But
okay.
My only question on that is because he's proposing techno posts to hold up the small workshops. And the small workshops will then be elevated over the ground. At that point, it's not really a winterized building, so there's no plumbing. So one good clarification is what's happening in the winter with this location. What buildings, because the farmers market's open on the sides and stuff like that. So seasonal use of these buildings, because these buildings are to low impact, not to put a foundation in, but they're going to be up above. I don't know how they're going to be plumbed, stuff like that.
Yeah, I guess that's what I was, once I saw what he's doing to that, it's like, that's different than just doing a lot of land disturbing activity across the whole site. So
I had a question that kind of raises after looking at this, and this isn't a comment specifically about the project, but that kind of a building that Jeff described is a lot less permanent for the future versus a 50-unit apartment building. Once that's built, it's there. What are the guarantees as we go forward for any of these projects that say we decided for whatever reason, A gets picked or B gets picked or whichever one it is, and we sell the property. The project we just looked at was very clear in their timeline of building the financing and the ability to do it to go forward. That was really the only one I think that you really saw that with. A project like this is much less permanent. And what are the guarantees down the road that those little units don't all just go down the road and something else happens on that property. That's not a judgment of this proposal at all, let me be clear, but it's a question.
Yeah, it is a question, and just the sustainability financially of renting some of this out.
Oh, can I add one other question to the last one? That reminds me, who's going to manage it into the future? Because that was a very different kind of proposal, which would be this one too. Somebody's got to manage that property as a rental agent kind of thing.
You mean back to the first one we reviewed?
Yeah, the first one we reviewed.
That's a good question. I assume they were the people who
I did too.
were proposing this would be the management group, but I don't know that. And the same with this one. Yeah. Okay. All right. Development cost. I think he was clear on that. And again, that's where I see. That's where it also came out that it says 250 plus 250,000 for site acquisition. So that's what makes me think again, he's going to write, he's going to buy that property. Financial capacity and that sort of thing. I don't know. I don't know if that was what addressed. Okay.
I think that would be a research project down the road.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, every proposal should come up with, a bank statement or something saying that they have the financial capacity to pull this off. I mean, that's got to be a requisite. I mean, there's no hands.
Exactly.
No question about
Across the board.
Yeah.
Redevelopment experience, that was addressed. Previous similar projects was addressed. Everybody okay with those?
Yep.
Description of the development team was included. Reasonably achievable project schedule. It said August of 22. I don't know. That may be pushing it. Permanent jobs was addressed. I saw a number of 99.
Yeah, it's at 53 to 99. New permanent jobs.
Brownfield cleanup, they address the issue of complying with that.
I was questioning that. Jeff, how did you feel on that one? Was that really answered? I had a question mark on mine, so I don't know that I felt, on the other one, it was very specific.
Included. I didn't think they included that.
Yeah.
Wait, which question again?
The brownfield cleanup into the future. They addressed the topic, but I don't think they addressed that.
They'll ensure that it complies with ongoing environmental requirements and controls.
Yeah, we could ask for clarification. I get the feeling he would do whatever it takes to make that site clean.
Just for a point of clarification, whoever takes ownership of this has that responsibility moving forward. It's a deed restriction, and there'll be environmental covenants on it. Anytime anyone does any digging in the site, they'll have to get a DEP permit to modify their VRAP, which is our VRAP, which will be theirs eventually. So they are responsible. It does come down to them to handle it.
Okay.
And certainly, I think the town would enforce certain deed restrictions as well if DEP, sometimes DEP doesn't move very quickly, but I'm certain the town would enforce deed restrictions on something like this as well. Based upon our concern for the environment, right? I mean, I don't see that being an issue in the town. We know they're doing something wrong. I think we will enforce those deed restrictions as well if we can.
Yeah.
Okay, from the RFP evaluation criteria is the next set. Contribute to the town's economy. Growth of the town's economy generates revenues attributable to development of the site through purchase or lease, proceeds and tax revenues, expand job opportunities. Some of those I think are unknown on this, but they were addressed. Green buildings to a certain extent was addressed. Any comments on that one?
I thought this project did that in spades in terms of contributing to the economy.
Yes.
And, you know, he mentioned a $2.5 million additional tax base.
Okay. Let's see, the next one, if it's not a commercial or mixed use, then solely residential preference will be given. So that this one is not residential. So that's an NA.
Yes.
All right, next one, preference given to proposals that are consistent with the recommendations of the guiding principles and then the tannery work group.
Eamon, can I just say something about that last one?
Yes, ma'am.
One of the things that I was thinking about this proposal, because that was the one sort of glaring omission. You know, I wondered, like, you know, what would be the impact of trying to combine the Mid-Coast, the Habitat for Humanity with this one?
With this one.
Take out some of the workshops, put in some affordable housing.
That's a good question. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but the Habitat, you know, if they take the 3 prime lots across the front of this property for housing lots, that impacts a couple of these other proposals. I think they're looking at just a proposal building 3 or 4 houses, and that's all they want of this site. And so how does that impact any of these other proposals? That may be a question in itself, but that's a good question, because if, in my mind, that those two wouldn't work together, given his proposal and his layout and his plan. It doesn't mean it couldn't be modified, but
I think it would be a nice modification of this plan.
yeah,
I think that would be interesting too.
a hybrid.
And I think they're the two organizations that are most capable of doing that, or willing to do that.
Yeah.
Do you want to look at the guiding principles? Is that?
Yes, let's do, but
do that?
let's keep that question in mind, because as we go through, especially when we get to Habitat, is how does it work with these other 3? Because they are not looking at an entire redevelopment of this site. They just want some building lots. And so that's a question down the road. But yes, Robin, listen.
So sell the site as a single parcel is
Right.
yes. Preference given to qualified buyers who allow some form of public access to the Riverwalk path at a minimum and public right-of-way certainly does that. Trees that line the street of the site should remain, yes. The site should be marketed to new owners who can create jobs, well-paying year-round sustainable jobs. Jeff, you're saying that's not year-round, so that's potentially an issue.
Well, I'm not saying it's not year round.
Or that's a question is,
I'm just wondering how it's going to be year round. Yeah.
so there's a question there. When targeting and selecting a new owner, the town should consider the economic multiplier effect of the employer. So there's not a yes or no to that. The town should target a new employer owner that will create new customer base in the area and not take customers from other established employers. I would say essentially yes. The town should attempt to create a demand for this site. Again, that's them, not the developer. Encourage the new owners to build flexible structures. This is flexible. Redevelopment of the site should be attractive and aesthetically compatible with the neighborhood. Again, everybody's going to have a different opinion, but I think they've certainly attempted to do that. The town should encourage new owners of the creative economy sector. It does that. New owners and developers should be encouraged to make positive use of the river, hydro energy orientation of the buildings relative to the river, etc. He's doing that, I think, mostly in his site plan. I don't know how people feel about that. Education, cultural use would be acceptable. The town should consider impact of increased traffic on the area. So that's
that one, that tannery work group.
then the tannery work group. There's two pages on this, really. Preserve green space and enhance the aesthetics of the Riverwalk. This is what the multi-use concept will do, and enable the wide variety of uses, recreational, commercial, and special events, be used and enjoyed by a broad cross-section of the community, young, old, year-round, and summer. Bring acceptable levels of noise and vehicular travel. That would be unknown, and I think that gets to that's traffic and parking study. Bring positive economic benefit to the Camden community, new jobs, new economic activity, and protect and enhance Camden town finances, avoiding expenses and increasing tax or fee receipts. And then other recommendations are select boards support the development of the farmers market space, secure brownfield grants, community fundraising, property being leased. They prefer it to be leased, not sold. Another one is suggesting a sell. And that the town seek proposals for developing the building space at a future. So that's those. It certainly hits a lot of those.
Okay. Anybody got anything to add to that? Okay, skill and experience of the redevelopers and contractors was addressed. The experience with US EPA and DEP addressed. Any observations on that one? Okay.
Before we leave this one, to Robin's question about she's been looking for the vote. Did the town vote on, did you ever get an answer to that? Because they have a whole section here on the history of the site. And on page 5 of their proposal, they did say in 2014, the majority of Camden voters supported commercial and business uses for the site as opposed to preserving it as a park and open space. So I didn't know if that was what you were looking for, or it doesn't say.
It is. I don't know, Jeremy, if you have that quickly. Janice sent me that. Hang on, I can find it. It's really.
I just thought before we left here, I wanted to remind you.
CEDAC, Tannery proposal. Is this? I will find it.
I don't have it right in front of me either.
I have it quick. I thought I could quickly bring it up. CEDAC comprehensive plan guiding. I thought I saved it.
But that was not the vote you were talking about?
Yes, it is the vote, and it was fairly close. It was and I'll find it before we're done here. But it basically said, do you want to use it for commercial use? A, check that off, or do you want to use it as a park? Check that off. Commercial use came out like, I don't remember what it was. There were a couple hundred votes between the two. It was fairly close, but commercial use was in fact what won the day.
I have those numbers here.
Oh, do you? Okay.
1,429 in favor of commercial business use, 1,360 for park open space use.
What was the first number, Roger? 1,000 what? 400?
1,429.
Okay, so pretty close.
That's a good voter turnout too.
Yeah.
It was in November. It was November. It
It was
wasn't
on the ballot with a.
Yeah, it was a ballot. It wasn't at the
Yeah.
the town meeting and 60 people showing
Those
up.
are valid.
Yep.
Roger, what was the park number?
Just a second.
1360.
360.
Wow, that's close.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Any other thoughts on that? All right. Friends of Tannery Park. Let's move on to that one.
Can I address something that Maria said earlier? And this isn't meant as an argument or at all, but it is talking about demographics and economic development. And when you look at housing, and I understand the point. We can say this job particularly is, or this, either project is not going to produce permanent employment because it's residential. But I know, having gone to several seminars on demography, housing and getting year-round families into a community is what makes a huge difference economically. They're the people that spend the money year-round versus more summer houses or something like that. And so I think maybe this isn't the place to do it, as Maria pointed out, but I think at some point we should encourage or look at what that economic impact is of housing, because to me, 50 units of affordable workforce housing for people to move in that are, people that are going to be in our restaurants, and the people that live here year round are the people who spend money. And I just don't think we should lose track of that. It's for down the road, but I think it's something that we need to keep in the discussion.
Robin, I think that is important. I guess all I was saying that is I'm not sure that in and of itself creates jobs.
No, I said I wasn't disagreeing with you,
Yeah.
but I just don't want to lose track of that, because I think it's an important point as we look at community and economic development.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Tannery Park. Okay, let's go through that. The proposals, RFP, from the RFP, purchase or lease price for the developer's acquisition of property, or in part or in its entirety. On this one, I think they're proposing the town retain that ownership and no lease revenue from it. I assume the arrangement with the farmers market would continue as it is now.
And can
And
we
then
add,
sell some lots to Habitat, was my other note to that. Sell 2 to 3 lots.
Can I just clarify for the record that
Yes.
Tannery Park and Habitat are not partners in this proposal? So Friends of Tannery Park has their proposal, and they're suggesting an entity. I don't know why they used Mid-Coast Habitat for Humanity as the entity, but they could have said 3 lots for housing up front and left it alone. But if you read Mid-Coast Habitat, they are not partners with Friends of Tannery Park. As Lehman was saying, Habitat would like 3 house lots up front. The rest of the land is for the town to decide what to do. Habitat is not working with Friends of Tannery Park on the proposal.
Okay. So
Otherwise, they would have submitted a joint proposal, I would assume.
Yeah. So what that also means is that the town could be free then to actually sell the 3 lots to anybody that wanted to build a house with certain restrictions. It doesn't have to be Habitat. It could be, but it doesn't have to be. That could still work as part of this package, but it's not dependent on each other.
Yeah.
Is that right?
And Lehman, that conceivably could work without this package too, couldn't it? The town owns the land.
Exactly. Yes, it could. And you'll, as we'll get to in a minute, Habitat is asking the town to donate those building lots. The town could just as easily sell them to somebody. But you're right. That's the way this could work. So it doesn't have to be in connection with Habitat for this proposal.
Well,
No,
and likewise, the town selling those lots doesn't depend on this proposal. The town has the ability to do that.
Exactly. If it wants to leave the rest of it the way it is or do something else totally different, yes.
Yeah, it's a zoning issue because we have first floor non-residential in that zone. So that's why it's not gone that way.
Yeah.
at one point too, it was part of the, when we looked at this earlier, it was part of the environmental cleanup was that residential was not allowed. And so we never considered that earlier in the process, because the only way we considered it is with live workspace, which nobody's come up in this, but looking at studio space downstairs and living space above, to get that the living space couldn't be on the ground floor at that point, and apparently that's changed. So
yeah, there's no real contamination right adjacent to the road.
Right.
So
yeah. One of
Okay.
the other things on this question that I think comes up later, but just so not only are they asking the town to maintain ownership of this property, it doesn't use the entire site. The town would retain ownership, therefore liability, upkeep, and all that kind of stuff. And I think that may come up later, but we need to note that.
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, this proposal, if we just looked at it in terms of money, the town wouldn't gain money, but the town would incur longer term costs to maintain the site for whatever use, the parks and other things that were put on the site. So, you know, for this one, it would just be a longer term cost to the town. And obviously there might be other benefits that are non-monetary. So if we're just looking at monetary costs, it's a really different proposal than a lot of the other ones where there might be a tax base contributing to the economy or other things.
I think also you're leaving it to the town then to find a lot of the funding available and maybe do some matching if you're getting grants. So it's not only, so there's that aspect of it too.
Yep.
This is a question I have written down later, but does this group have a 501c3? Are they any kind of a corporate entity that has a liability or anything? I didn't think. Okay, thank you.
Not that I'm aware of.
No, I don't think they are at this point.
Okay. Description of proposed uses, I think, was clearly defined. A lot of, well, again, farmers markets are given across the board, but and this one, three residential units, and then a lot of it was public access. I guess all of it. Playground, bike track, environmental meadow, pickleball. I know pickleball is something that is of interest to a lot of folks in our community. The skate park right now has a home, but that is a potential use as well. Ice rink, pavilion. So a lot of public access was addressed in here.
I didn't consider a picture of a pickleball court with people playing to be a detailed description. Literally, because it just said pickleball and had a picture of people playing pickleball.
Right.
So I said that it didn't contain a detailed description because most of what we saw were like pictures of a bike pump track, but not a plan for a bike pump track. And there weren't costs associated with each of those things. So to me, it felt more like a conceptual plan as opposed to a detailed description or a detailed plan.
Right. I had a question too that I wrote down. It said future additions, which you're talking about, phased sequence over time. How much time are they talking about? Was it going to be like within the first couple of years, or depend on fundraising, grant raising, all of that? So would that mean that part of the property just stays as is? I wasn't quite sure about that.
Well, and the town retains ownership, so who's driving it? You know, yeah.
Yeah, I think that'll get into financial feasibility or capability.
Right.
Yeah, the environmental study meadow to me was kind of a red flag because, I mean, it's kind of boring. I've done those study meadows back in the day, and you're talking about at that site, it's going to be like a little patch of like high grass, and then there's going to be a pump track and stuff. A lot of this stuff was very conceptual, very, and I don't know if it was to scale. I mean, the pickleball court, I didn't know that was to scale, and there wasn't a detailed analysis of how much it's going to cost and where the funding is going to come.
And dare I point out that there is an awesome playground a couple 100 feet down the street. Maria, that is so cool.
Yeah.
I went over there this weekend in the pouring rain.
Yeah, we go there the weekends are great. It's awesome. We ride our bikes over.
Yeah, it looks wonderful.
Okay. Description of the developer's entity. I think we've touched on that. The developer is the town.
Yep.
I guess.
Right.
Well,
And you know what? The community, I have
The town. It kind of is.
of Camden citizens, they have 240 members, I think they said.
Yep.
And I have a question. I had the question, is this a corporation, a partnership? Is there a board? I don't know anything about what their group consists of, actually.
And we established they're not a 501c3, so there's no corporate entity for any of this.
Right.
Right. All right. Development costs, again, not much detail there as to what the estimated price of any of these structures or that we're looking at.
I think there was none.
Yeah.
Right.
Redevelopment experience. Again, a lot of these based on who we're talking about putting this together. If you're looking at, again, the town being the developer and being the person managing all that, that's different than trying to look at this as a group of friends of Tannery Park. Even, so who are we looking at when we try to answer these questions?
Well, that needed to be detailed in the proposal, though. So, I mean, to me, the answer is no on quite a few.
Well, I guess that's what, if you're looking strictly at the Friends of Tannery Park to answer these questions, a lot of this is no.
Yep.
Is that a fair statement?
True.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Previous and current similar projects, description of the development team, achievable project schedule, not available.
It's not only not available, it's really not, even the conceptual one that's there. The concept of at some point down the road is stage 4 where there might be buildings is very vague. So I didn't see a schedule that worked for me that was real.
Okay. Again, the same with brownfield cleanup. From the RFP evaluation criteria, contributing to the town's economy, generating revenues, expanding job opportunities, tax revenues, green building practices.
No.
Yeah, I don't think any of that was addressed, or the answer is no.
Yeah. Okay, either if the next one has to do with if it's not commercial or mixed use, then the restricted affordability not applicable there. Preference to the proposals that are consistent with the recommendations. Robin, you seem to be the keeper of those. What say you?
I printed them off for each one. So
Okay.
Sell the site as a single parcel is no. First, it's not selling, and I actually missed the piece with the Habitat for Humanity in there, but or some developer coming in for part of it. Preference given to qualified buyers who will allow some form of public access. They are allowing public access. There's qualified buyer would be a question because it's basically the town becomes the qualified buyer, I guess. Trees that line the street remain. That is yes. Site marketed to new owners that create jobs. That's a no. Consider the economic multiplier impact. That's a no. Town, something else? No. Town should target a new employer or owner that will create a new customer base in the area. That would be a no. Town should attempt to create a demand for the site to make it unique. Again, I think that's on the town. Flexible structures that's adaptable for future uses. I guess that would be a yes. It's pretty flexible, although there are no structures. I don't know how we really, how does anybody want to answer that one? Redevelopment would be attractive and aesthetically compatible. Town should encourage new owners and businesses of the creative economy. The new owners and developers should be encouraged to make positive use of the river. Again, that's falling back on the town, I guess. Educational cultural uses would be acceptable. I guess they're sort of addressing that in some pieces of it. And then the other is increased traffic to the area. On the tannery work group's objectives, preserve green space and enhance the aesthetics of the Riverwalk. So I guess it is doing that. Enable a wide variety of uses, recreational, commercial, and special events. Commercial is really left out of that one, but it does the other ones. Be used and enjoyed by a broad cross-section of the community, young, old, year-round, and summer. It would do that. Bring acceptable levels of noise and vehicular traffic. That would again go back to a traffic, parking, and I guess use study. Having had the skateboard park in my backyard and knowing where it's moved now, there are different opinions on the noise level of that.
I think I made a note of that as well. That the skateboard park, if you watch the select board meeting the other night, they had that conversation. So
yeah, I always thought it was kind of cool to hear them behind our house. But anyway, protect or enhance Camden town finances, avoiding expenses and increasing tax or fee receipts. We'll point out that this was the Tannery Working Group's objective. The select board support the development of the farmers market. It continues that. The town secure brownfield grants for future site remediation. The town would consider to do that. Community fundraising is encouraged. It does do that. The property be leased and not sold. It does that. And the town seek proposals for developing building space at a future date. So this would be leaving the town to develop any kind of buildings in the future.
anybody have anything to add on that point? Okay, skills and experience of the redevelopers. Again, that's a none or an NA. And,
Well,
as is experience of working with US EPA and VRAP. Okay, anything to add on that? On the Friends of Tannery Park?
Nope.
it puts a lot on the town.
Yes. Okay, last but not least, Mid-Coast Habitat. Jeremy has pointed out, and I think we've had a little conversation on this, is that they are not proposing to develop the entire site. This could or could not be part of either Friends of Tannery Park or with the one of the other proposals, but they are looking for 3 building lots, and they're asking the town to donate those.
Jeremy,
So
can I ask? Oh, there goes Jeremy.
Go ahead.
I'm here.
Quick question. If we were having this conversation about potentially taking 2 of these projects and Frankensteining them together into one, does the timeline allow that? We've asked for proposals. There was a request for proposal. They had a date. I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff. Would there be potential for another proposal to come in where 2 of these would decide to do something collaboratively?
I mean, I think there's potentially time. I will say that I've talked to, 3 of the entities that submitted about the process and where things are going. And I know that they're probably listening or watching these. So my gut says is at least one of these groups is like thinking about, what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting it. We're just keeps coming up. I'm just asking, is it even a possibility before it continues to come up?
I think it's a potential possibility. That's a question I think the select board should ask the entities when they're in front of them.
I think that's one of the questions.
It wouldn't be that one of the entities would would actually be the person that whose proposal is accepted, and then they went out and did this collaboration and came back, or is it then at that point a moot point? You can't do that. I mean, could they do that?
Well, I mean, there's a lot here, and I think Yeah, I mean, I'd really have to take a look at, the plan from Cranesport to really see. I mean, so if we're talking like a 9,000 square foot lot or say 3 house lots for habitat, um, that, that eats into the land pretty good. And we got the shoreland zone, we got setbacks, we got, floodplain, we've got other issues. Just, I mean, I get the idea, but we're eating into some serious land area if we do get rid of, 3 9,000 square foot house lots.
And I think our charge is to look at each one of these individually.
Individually, it is.
Yeah.
And I think, and that's exactly right. And I think you can make questions or comments, include them to the board, and then the board would then present them to whoever.
Yeah, I think so. One thought I have, and tell me if I'm wrong, is if we look at this by itself and carve out 3 lots, that makes it very difficult for at least 2 of those other 3 proposals to go forward in their current state. And that's just one thought I have, and we might want to make sure everybody understands, because it does, especially if you're looking at 3 lots across Washington Street there. That really takes a chunk out of 2 of these other 3 proposals. So,
I mean, that was my largest complaint on this project, is that it's not utilizing the property. It's not selling it. It leaves a big chunk of the property still in ownership with the town.
Right.
And so it's, I would have loved to have seen 10 houses. And how do we do that? And how do we adjust the zoning to do something like that to maximize use of the property?
And I know too, just from reading the newspapers, Jeremy, that, there's talk about affordable housing up on a Sagamore Farm property, and the select board would have to decide where the point of, greatest return would be in terms of affordable housing supply or land availability. And so that's something they would have to wrestle with, but that's something they can't ignore either, I think, in their considerations.
No, that's very true. I will say a lot of these projects, when you're going for tax credits and TIFs and all that stuff, you have to check all these different boxes, right? And often these boxes are you within a downtown area, or are you served by sewer? You get more points when you go through that process. Sagamore right now, obviously, is not served by sewer. I would consider it still part of downtown. It's only a mile walkable to the downtown. So, but yeah, I mean, good question, Roger.
And when I look at the Mullins proposal, and I look at the exact same spot where Habitat for Humanity has suggested they put their houses, the Mullins proposal has 2 1,200 square foot buildings in the exact same spot. So I don't, in terms of taking up a lot of the space, I haven't overlaid the things, but I do wonder if it's as the impact it would have as something, if the town was interested in doing some combination of having both some affordable housing and economic development. None of the proposals offer both. And I do wonder if this proposal, even if the town, if this were the one that the select board were interested in, if they could even work to consider with the developer, would they consider doing affordable housing? Because I look at the number of buildings that are on this site that are not that different from necessarily the footprint of a smaller home. I don't know if it would be as challenging as it is, I don't know.
Jeremy, do we know that Habitat houses actually have a affordability component that carries for the life of the structure, or does it just go with the first couple of owners?
No, they require, I may get this wrong, but they are covenants in there that they have first right of refusal to buy it back. And I saw something else in here that I think would kind of limit the ability of the owner to just go out and sell that. And,
I believe resale is tied to cost of living increases over time. So I think it's in perpetuity.
It is, I think, and don't, but I saw something to that effect. I don't see it right now. They, to my knowledge, they do have deed restrictions on that and affordability covenants and on all their houses.
It's my understanding as well.
I just wish that was a denser development, but anyway, should we just go through these
So
questions?
it does say the homes will have deed restrictions, affordability covenants to maintain affordability. That's all it says, Roger. It does say that.
Okay. Oh, I missed that. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go down through the rest of this. I think we know what it is. And you know, it's a little bit different than the other three and what they're wanting to do. But they do have a description of the proposed use of those lots. They've made it very clear. I think we all know who Habitat is and what they do.
Lehman, we kind of missed the first question, which is a proposed purchase price.
Okay.
Just
Yes.
thank
you. And
a
they're
donation.
asking that the town donate those 3 lots. And I'm not sure what the value. I'm not sure what the
Potentially
value of that
4
would be.
Just as a point, that would require subdivision approval to do 3 house lots. So that if they're asking for that, that would be borne by the town to do that under their scenario.
Okay. Okay. Description of developer's entity, estimated development costs. They've made that clear. And I assume that the utilities are there, right? There's no, you know, they can tie into everything they need right there. There's no cost to the town, so to speak, of running.
No, they would have to bear the cost of that as part of their project.
Okay. Yeah, their redevelopment experience with EPA, they think they make it clear that they haven't dealt with that, but are prepared to. Would that be something they'd have to address if they're looking at three building lots close to the street? Is that part of this area?
I mean, certainly they'll have to bring a consultant on board to manage the environmental issues for them to make sure they're doing that. We're not going to do that for them.
Okay. Previous or current similar projects. You know that.
I was wondering, I had a question about that. There have been homes they've built in Camden, but I didn't see them on their list there. They've done some homes in Camden.
They have done, I mean, I don't know, 30 something houses. I think they are probably identified maybe some of their more recent ones, and they've been working not in Camden in the last 2 or 3 years, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
I know they've done they're doing that small kind of subdivision in Rockland. They've done some rehabs and some new development in Rockland. I mean, some new builds in Rockland and in Thomaston, but I'm not sure.
I think there's one up on Cobb Hill Road, I think was their most recent one. And I don't know, that was maybe 6 years ago. Maybe less than that now. So they've done a couple at least, Meg, in town.
Yeah, I thought they had. Okay.
I mean, land's expensive too in town. Everyone knows that. You know, it's not easy to come by a piece of
building lot,
dilapidated building that they can just pick up for nothing.
Yeah, and then build an affordable home on top of. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Reasonably achievable project schedule. I think they address that. I know they've got several other commitments, you know, irons in the fire, so to speak, of things they're working on, including this Philbrick in Rockland, and I think maybe another development in Rockland. I'm not sure, but I mean, I don't know where this falls in in the schedule of when if they were to acquire these lots, when they could actually start construction.
So that's a question to ask of them.
Well,
I think so.
They did say construction start April of 22.
And it was flexible based on what was going on with
Getting the
everything.
permitting and everything.
Right.
Okay, and then the next one addresses the deed restriction and affordability covenant, and that is stated in there. After brownfield cleanup, developer entity will ensure the development complies with an ongoing environmental requirements and controls. They say yes to that, I think.
The other question I had about the brownfield cleanup and into the future was, even say they are totally experienced, they would no longer own those properties. So how does this carry to the new property owners, and do they then become responsible, or who carries that liability over time into the future?
That's a good question, but yeah, if they do sell, so once if the town does sell the property and we retain a certain portion of it and we sell off a certain piece of it, our VRAP we have to be finalized, have a certificate of completion for our VRAP before we can even sell that property. So if Habitat gets the property, the same will go for them. If they buy this and develop 3 house lots and then they're selling them, then that would transfer to the new owner.
Right.
Yeah. Yep.
So the homeowner would be responsible for that.
Uh-huh.
Because we're asking here, does this entity have the capacity to maintain that into the future? But that's not who's going to continue ownership.
They will not continue ownership. It'll be passed.
Right.
Correct. There will be deed restrictions and covenants on the property as well that will go from property to property to property, owner to owner to owner.
And what impact would that have? I mean, what would be the foreseeable environmental requirements? And could somebody in an affordable housing afford whatever the environmental requirements are that would be required of them?
Sure. So, and I don't know the whole site yet, how it's all going to play out, but if there's this, an area that has some contaminated soil that has a cap on it, say, and you can have a cap could be just 12 or 18 inches of soil material with vegetation on the top of it. A cap can be a driveway. A cap can be the slab in a home, and with a vapor barrier. So if down the road, someone decides who owns this property and you want to dig on it, so an environmental covenant or deed restriction will say there shall be no digging in the property in certain locations, based on this, VRAP that was completed, without the express permission from the DEP. And therefore, then they have to go through that process. So in theory, someone in one area would not be able to say on their own, just get an excavator and say they want to put in, a big fire pit or whatever in their backyard, and they just start digging. You can't do that on a property that has a VRAP site without approval from the DEP. So they would go through that process.
Or a different structure like a garage or an outbuilding or something, which they probably would have to come to the town to get some permission for.
Correct.
A tree.
Or a tree.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Evaluation criteria from the RFP. Property, it does create housing and increase revenue through property taxes, I guess, were the two I've looked at. Not necessarily green building practices, I don't think, unless they have a different, I'm not sure where they stand with the houses they're building and how they're addressing green building practices.
They did say something about that in here, didn't they?
They said something about, I think, efficiency, but I didn't think they really addressed building practices.
I think it's more energy efficiency. Is that what you're thinking with, cost of utilities? Okay, then development, if it's residential, preference given to proposals that with permanent deed restrictions for affordability. Again, they've addressed that. Okay, recommendations from the Tannery Work Group and the guiding principles.
Okay, the guiding principles: sell the site as a single parcel. It does not do that. Preference will be given to qualified buyers who allow some form of public access to the river. It's leaving a large portion of the property undeveloped. I guess their parcels would not be doing that. Trees that line the street would remain. I believe it does that. The site marketed to new owners who can create jobs, not applicable. When targeting a new owner, the town should consider economic multiplier effect, not applicable. The town should target a new employer owner that will create a new customer base, not applicable. The next one is really on the town. Encourage new owners to build flexible structures that will be adaptable for future use. Their houses, I mean, I don't know that that's bad, but anyway. Redeveloping the site should be attractive and aesthetically compatible with the neighborhood. I think it does that for the part that they would do. The town would encourage new owners, businesses in the creative economy sector. Not doing that, not applicable. The new owner developers would be encouraged to make positive use of the river. It's really not abutting on the river. Educational, cultural use acceptable, no. Town should consider impact of increased traffic on the area. So again, I think, we can have that conversation about the impact of affordable housing on the economy is separate from what they're asking there. Tannery Work Group's objectives for the site: preserve green space and enhance the aesthetics of the riverwalk and overall tannery site. It's not really dealing with the riverwalk, it's just those specific properties. Enable a wide variety of uses. It is solely housing. Be used and enjoyed by a broad cross-section of the community. That would depend on the demographics of the houses, but not really applicable. Bring acceptable levels of noise and vehicular traffic. It's residential in a residential area. Bring positive economic benefit to the Camden community, new jobs and new economic activity. Protect or enhance Camden town finances, avoiding expenses and increasing tax or fee receipts. It does. It is not a purchase of the property, but it is adding tax base for those properties as divided. The select board would support development of the farmers market space lease. It allows that because we would still own that property, or somebody would, the rest of it. Town secure brownfield grants for future site remediation. That's happening. Community fundraising be encouraged for site reuse projects. Again, that's the piece of the property that they're not using. Property to be leased, not sold to users. That's not part of this. And town seeks proposals for developing a building space at a future date. That would be what this is.
Okay. Anything added? Okay, skill and experience of the redevelopers. I think that's established, well-defined. And again, we know who they are and their what they usually do. This is pretty standard. Experience of working with U.S. EPA and DEP. That's, again, they've acknowledged none, but that's something that has to be clarified, I think, and we've just talked about how that trickles down from the town to Habitat and then to the eventual owners of the property. My one observation on this one that I made a note is that I would hope at some point they would have a conversation about the design of what they build being in keeping with the neighborhood. I think that's the other people have addressed that, and I think it would be important that we have that conversation with them as well. Other proposals have. So that might just be something to consider as conversations go on.
You're talking about facade. I mean,
Yep,
they're showing
exactly.
floor plans which are in scale, certainly,
Yes,
but not addressing facade.
but facade, just so it looks like it belongs in the neighborhood.
Well, I think their history kind of shows that they have done that.
Okay. Okay. I think well, unless anybody has anything to add on that, that's a pretty thorough discussion of all four of those. Now on to the next steps. Jeremy, we talked a little bit about what do we do next. And our next meeting is next Monday, the 14th at 4:00. What Jeremy, you had talked to at the beginning of our conversation tonight about maybe some next steps.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we originally were talking about trying to break, 2 or 3 of these down and do each one at a meeting. But
Right.
I think what you did was you went down through the entire, almost all of the list. So that's good. And I think there's 4 things that still need to be looked at. Is zoning amendments, are they required? And we could have a discussion about that. I don't think that's going to require a lot of time. And then incentives, are incentives needed? And that would be, I think we all know there's 1, but maybe 2. That would be the TIF needed for Northland, housing TIF. And then Crane Sports question about, or issue about, is the 250,000 really a site acquisition cost? Or is that, are we obligated to do something else in order to get that 250? I think is the question.
Right.
So, and then outside of that, we have the comp plan and we have the select board comp plan recommendations and the select board goals and priorities. I almost feel like we can hammer out the zoning amendments and the incentives questions in like 15 minutes next time we meet.
Okay.
And then at the same time, and I'm just trying to think of, because we're talking meet next Monday and then the 21st, and then have something for the select board on the 4th. So if we can kind of blast through the zoning piece on what kind of zoning is needed, zoning amendments are needed, and what kind of incentives, blast through that, then we can really spend the bulk of next Monday and the bulk of the 21st or half of the 21st talking about the comp plan stuff and the select board goals and priorities, so that the second half of the 21st, we can really start narrowing down what are the groups, I don't want to say recommendations, but what the summary of the discussion and the questions and the issues are. We can really have that nailed down the 21st and have that finalized for a draft on the 4th. Am I being too optimistic? But I don't think so. I mean, I think you just went through the entire list for the most part. And if I can do a touch on a zoning piece for each one and incentive, which you can talk about next week, that's an easy. I mean, or we can talk about it right now. And then really focus. Let's do it next week. I don't think we should.
Yeah, next week would be good.
Yeah. Let's not do it tonight.
But let's do that. And then that way we can, again, just focus on zoning and incentives. Just a brief conversation about that. And then you can really get into the comp plan and the select board priorities next week, and then have some time the following week to think about them. I think they're going to be pretty obvious to you. And it's going to be like, that makes sense. This is consistent with our comp plan, or this isn't. I think it's going to make sense. So that would be my recommendation.
About the comp plan, what you and Jeff had talked about before, of kind of going through and picking out the areas that we really need to focus on. I think that would be helpful if you could send that to us.
Yeah. So my plan is to try to work on that tomorrow. And I'll send some stuff to Jeff. I mean, I'm going to cut and paste certain sections from the comp plan and say, yes, I sent you that whole document, but this is what Jeff and I feel is most important out of our comp plan for this discussion.
Jeremy, when you say incentives, I guess I'd like a definition of incentives, because I think we're using that term to mean things if somebody was going to come in and buy that property and build something and just buy it and take it from us and give us $250,000 and we didn't have to do anything else, it's what's happening other than that. So whether it's a TIF, whether it's the town owning it, if we're giving them a property, we're donating the property to them. That's if we say the value of the property is whatever the value of the property is, that's an incentive to me. So it's not
Fair.
just those technical things. There's upkeep for some of them that would become ours
Okay,
or remain ours. So I think those are important to list their costs to us, really.
good point. I think something I forgot on that list was those overall short and long-term costs. That we had that on the list. So we focus on those things next week. Incentives, what incentives are, and the overall short and long-term costs and zoning, and then we can just do a brief thing on the comp plan and the select board's goal and priorities.
Yeah, and you know, Jeremy, if you're going to do costs, I don't know if this is implied in it, you might just want to add also potential risks. So when Jeff mentioned earlier, you know, the thing with the big redevelopment and the workshops, if they're not really firmly planted, they could just be gone at some point in the future, and then what? And it might be helpful to be able to just list that could become questions, but it's a potential risk to the town of certain proposals. You know, I mean, a potential risk of the Friends of Tannery Park is that the money might not be raised for 10 more years and it stays looking like it looks. I mean, so I think it's important to be able to list those just associated, and those could be potential costs. They're not monetary. So we might consider another column or something just about, you know, potential risks, longer term and short term of each of the projects.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Risks or concerns.
And Jeremy, should we have a column about brownfield issues? I don't know if those have been resolved, if they're where we are in terms of the riverbank stuff. Or is it all taken care of so it's not something that we need to turn our attention to, or are there some things we need to be aware of on that?
Well, remember that listening to the guiding principles every time Robin read it, remember that since those guiding principles happened, we also did the easement with the land trust, so that there's a 75-foot wide swath there that will forever be towns. That's not going to, you know, go to an entity. So,
right.
As far as the environmental cleanup, likely on the riverbank, Roger, is where there's going to be the need for ongoing cleanup moving forward after we get through this initial brownfield grant and we do this cleanup. As part of it, likely there will be an area along the bank that will have to define and probably put some signage up and maintain, and we'll have to get to that later with another cleanup grant. We'll just have to provide for that.
So nothing out there brownfield wise affects the acreage that would be developed or sold?
Not that I'm aware of, because as I understand going through, they can design these caps for whatever use. Again, it depends on what type of cap or what type of cleanup needs to happen. But so I do have, just so you know, I have our consultant is going through these proposals. I said that the last time. They're going through these proposals to try to finagle all of these proposals into the ABCA, into the community relations plan, so that we're able to transition into whatever direction the town decides to go in, because that's critical just based on timing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. So Jeremy, you're going to kind of summarize the comp plan, you and Jeff, and then send that out to us.
Yeah.
Any other assignments, homework, things we need to be thinking about preparing for before next Monday?
I just want to say there's some really cool stuff in there. I'm going to give those
Absolutely.
I mean, people put a lot of time and thought into it. And there's some really interesting ideas.
Yes, I agree. This is interesting to dig into and just find, you know, what's the thinking and what the options are out there. This is very interesting stuff. And I appreciate each of you sitting through a 2.5 hour meeting. And everybody is here for the second week in a row. I hope we can maintain this for a couple of more weeks, but thank you, because I know this is a big commitment on your time. And just thanks for being here and working through this for us, with us. All right, anybody, any closing thoughts? Okay.
Good job.
We're
Yeah.
done. Take
Same time
the rest
next
of the day
Monday.
off.
Sometime, same time, Monday at 4.
Same time.
Okay.
Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Hi, Mark. Hello, Janice. All right, I'm going to stay on here so I don't leave. There we go.
You're all good to leave, Jeremy, if you want.
Okay.